The 2023 NFL Draft has concluded, and in today's video, one of a couple, we're going to be discussing the biggest winners from the 2023 NFL Draft. And I do want to have a little bit of a preface here. The first team we're going to be talking about, the Arizona Cardinals, as you can see on the screen, this does not mean that they are quote-unquote the biggest winners of the draft. And when we do the biggest losers of the draft, this does not mean the first team we talk about are the biggest losers. So without further ado, let's dive right into the Arizona Cardinals and what really made them, win the 2023 draft. And when you think about the Arizona Cardinals, there's not a lot to get excited about. And if you think about their defensive roster prior to the 2023 draft, there's probably not a lot of guys that you could name right off the bat that either start for them, play for them, or, get significant snaps. So my biggest thing heading into the draft for first-year GM Monty Ossenfort and Jonathan Gannon, the new head coach, was everyone knew they wanted to trade back. And when everyone knows you want to trade back, that's not a good thing for you typically. However, the Cardinals handled this very well, and why I consider them big winners was their number one goal heading into this draft was to acquire a 2024 first. There were several videos in the pre-draft process about what teams should do in the top 5, teams that should trade out. The Cardinals were usually in that discussion because they simply needed to acquire more talent. And they traded with the Houston Texans, who had the 12th pick in the draft prior to Thursday night, and they acquired the Texans 2024 first. And what's key about this trade with the Texans, and we'll eventually get back into the trade back up with the Lions that they had to get Paris Johnson, but the thing that was key for this trade with the Texans was they acquired the Texans 2024 first. The Texans had the Browns, or still have the Browns 2024 first as well, and who knows with the Deshaun Watson situation, if he's going to come back to the player that he was pre-everything, and if he's going to be a Pro Bowl level player, but the Texans are very much rebuilding. And while we will get to the Texans at some point in today's video, as I thought they had a very good draft as well, I thought it was critical for the Cardinals, for their future success to acquire the Texans first. And they still got the left tackle of their future in Paris Johnson. This grade as a B to me is from Pete Prisco of CBS's. I think it's more along the lines of an A- or an A grade for Paris, but they had 2 picks in the top 34 then, or they had right back to back because they also acquired the Texans second round pick when they traded back, which they got an absolute haul for, by the way. And they traded this pick back with the Titans, who came up and got Will Levis, to go back and get B.J. Ojulari. Now, B.J. Ojulari was one of my favorite players in the pre-draft process. He's very young, and I think he's going to fit the Cardinals' defense like a glove. He's young, so is Paris, by the way. So your first 2 picks are guys that are probably going to be 4 or 5 year starters, and while it's not beneficial that they're going to each have growing pains, what I think is beneficial for them is when the Cardinals expect to be good, because again, this isn't a 1-year turnaround, these guys are going to, they're going to be coming into their primes, right? BJ is, at the moment, he's just 20 years old. These guys are going to be 21 during their rookie seasons. And they even got value later in the draft. I loved Kei'Trel Clark in the 6th round at pick 180 overall. I loved Owen Pappoe at 168. And I loved Michael Wilson, albeit there are injury concerns, but if you're taking a player with the talent Wilson has at pick 94 for a player that could be a several-year starter, I'm all for it. And I also like Garrett Williams as well, who I thought was a top 55, top 60 talent, and obviously he had an injury, so, before the injury right here, smallish frame, but that's fine. I liked what the Cardinals did in this draft, and to me, they are very big winners. Now, another team that I want to go to is the Indianapolis Colts, and guys, I cannot get enough of what Chris Ballard did all throughout the draft. And I think Chris Ballard entered the 2023 draft very much under the belief and mindset that I'm drafting for my job here. And with Anthony Richardson at number 4, first off, I love that pick, and I know there's going to be people that are, they're going to be on the fence of, well, we'll see how it plays out, we'll see how he does type thing. I love the pick. You're putting Anthony Richardson in a situation in the same backfield as Jonathan Taylor. They still have Michael Pittman. Oh, and by the way, they acquired Josh Downs with an absolute steal at pick 79. And I wasn't the biggest Blake Freeland fan in the pre-draft process, not because I don't like the player, but because of where he was valued. I thought there was serious consideration that Blake was going to be a top 70 pick. I thought he might have been, a late 2, early 3rd round prospect, but for them to get him in the 4th round, I loved. And if I love Blake Freeland at pick 106, there's no words to say how much I love the Aid Adebawore pick at 110, and then even Darius Rush at pick 138, Will Mallory at 162. Guys, they had value all throughout the draft, and you try and leave each draft with 1 or 2 starters, but it wouldn't surprise me at all. Obviously, Anthony Richardson's going to be a starter. Well, for good or bad, we'll find that out. I think it's going to be good in the long run. But Julius Brent's going to be a starter. Josh Downs going to be a starter. Aid Adebawore, I would imagine at some point, is going to be a starter. And even if Aid's not, you get a 4th round rotational rusher with his height, weight, and speed and athleticism. Guys, I love what the Colts did. And by the way, I said this a lot throughout the live stream that we did for the 2nd round of the draft. I have no problem loading up on secondary, which they got Jalen Jones later in the 7th round, and of course Darius Rush in the 5th round when you're in the loaded AFC, because this conference is absolutely insane with all of the quarterbacks that they have. So for the Colts to get depth throughout while getting potential high-level starters, and of course led by Anthony Richardson in a high-level starter, potential of course, I love what they did, and I thought they were very big winners, and I think in some ways that Chris Ballard saved his job. Now, for anyone that wants to hate, they could very easily clip this if Anthony Richardson becomes a draft bust and say, look what this idiot said in 3 years from now. Hopefully that's not the case, but I love what Chris Ballard and the Colts did throughout this draft. Now, another big winner, guys, I couldn't get enough of what the Giants did. Now, they didn't have that many picks, but the top 3 picks to me for where the value was grand slams. Not a little 320-foot home run that barely clears the fence at Yankee Stadium with that 314-foot that right field porch. These were grand slams for values. Deonte Banks, 24th overall, routinely a top 15 mocked player. Top 20. I'll say top 20 conservatively. Top 20 mocked player. You get him at 24. A player your division rival Washington Commanders passed on to take who I thought was an inferior prospect in Emmanuel Forbes, and to come back on night 2 and get John Michael Schmitz in the interior offensive line to, again, help Daniel Jones, and later on Friday night to get Jalen Hyatt, who, yes, people are going to say he's a one-trick pony, and he is, but what I really love about this, and I explained this to one of my friends about why I love this pick so much, is Jalen Hyatt is going to force defenses to play that too high every single play, because if Jalen Hyatt is, hypothetically on the left side and you're running a middle of the field closed concept where the safety is going to have to completely haul ass to try and cover that side, I don't like the chances of that. So Jalen Hyatt is going to force defenses to play too high. It's going to, in turn, open up running lanes for Saquon, which, by the way, also kind of enhances that John Michael Schmitz pick late in the 2nd round. So the top 3 picks are really what I was after for the Giants, but I also loved the value that they got with Eric Gray at 172. I thought he was a top 150 player, and to get him that much later in the 5th round. Guys, the Giants, and Gervarius Owens, I liked him as well. I thought he was a very underrated prospect, 254. I loved what they did throughout the draft process. Now, they're not every winner in today's video is going to have 6 or 7 just grand slams, but for the Giants to have the picks they did, I loved, and I really thought they at minimum have 3 starters from this class with their first 3 picks. Now, we're going to stay in the NFC East for this next one, and you can probably imagine where we're going here. And it's the Philadelphia Eagles. Guys, Jalen Carter, Nolan Smith, we'll discuss. But the first player that I actually want to talk about is Moro Ojomo. I thought he was very underrated throughout the draft process. And every year there's players that fall down the board for some inexplicable reason. Moro Ojomo, no idea why he just kept falling and falling. And I'm a Vikings fan. I wanted us to take him. We need defensive line help. But Howie Roseman, of course, he's going to get credit for the Georgia Bulldog guys and even acquiring DeAndre Swift, which we'll talk about here in a minute. And of course, Keely Ringo as well. But Moro Ojomo, to me, was one of the biggest steals on day 3. To get him at pick 249 was utterly insane. And the write-up that they have is draft crush of mine, one of the purest up-the-field rushers on the interior in this class. Slippery, effective pass rush moves and plays with decent power. Love the fit. Of course, they talk about Jalen Carter and Jordan Davis, but guys, Moro Ojomo, I don't know how often he's going to see the field. I hope he does, but he is an NFL-level talent, and I thought that was the biggest steal on day 3. Now, Jalen Carter, Nolan Smith, let's go ahead and talk about these guys. I mean, you guys have heard it. There's not a lot that I can say that you guys already haven't heard. Jalen Carter, I think, will walk into the best situation for him personally. There's a lot of familiarity for him with his Georgia Bulldog teammates, whether it's Jordan Davis, whether it's Nakobe Dean, whether it's Nolan now, or even Keely Ringo, and of course the veterans that the team has, such as Jason Kelsey and Lane Johnson. I think they're really going to do everything they can to make sure Jalen lives up to his potential. So, love that. And by the way, I also thought Sidney Brown was a very underrated pick for them. Like that pick as well in the 3rd round, and Tyler Steen too, for that matter. I don't really understand the grade of a D+ because this is a developmental guy to eventually play on the interior. So I like these picks, but of course I think it was obviously highlighted by Jalen Carter, Nolan Smith, and Moro Ojomo. Tanner McKee, if he's a backup quarterback and plays backup for him for a couple years, good for him. Obviously they just gave Jalen all that money. He's not going to go anywhere, so I didn't really feel the need to discuss the Tanner McKee pick all that much. Now, next up, I did want to discuss the Houston Texans, guys. So, full disclosure, I wasn't the biggest fan of Juice Scruggs in the late 2nd round, and they actually traded up to get him. So, if you go back and watch the live, my initial reaction was kind of like, why? Because they traded up not far in the 3rd round. So, I mean, but the fact of the matter was they gave up a couple of picks, and I didn't think they had to get Drew Scruggs. So I was a little disappointed with that pick, but on day 3, I thought they got a lot of value really everywhere. Jarrett Patterson, 201 overall, love that. Henry To'oTo'o was a guy I was screaming for my Vikings to take. I was tweeting it when we were on the clock at 119, then we traded back with the Chiefs at 134. I still would have been fine with To'oTo'o at 134, and the Texans get him a full round later. And then, of course, if you guys know about sleeper wide receivers, you know about Xavier Hutchinson from Iowa State. Brandon Hill, higher floor safety without a true trump card. Hitter more than a fluid sink and coverage type. Now, this is obviously a dart throw in the late 7th round, but anytime you can get a player with a higher floor in the 7th round, even if he can be a backup player for 3 or 4 years, that's a hit for a late 7th round pick. And I do want to say, I love them getting CJ Stroud and Will Anderson, but I think you guys probably already know that. You got to get your quarterback of the future, especially in the AFC. And now we have an AFC South of Trevor Lawrence, Will Levis, CJ Stroud, and Anthony Richardson. And that's just your division. Obviously, you guys know about everybody else in the conference, but you have to be able to compete. So I like what the Texans did, and even the Tank Dell selection I like quite a bit. If you guys did not see this, Tank he DM'd the Texans on Instagram back in December, and it said, "Don't let me leave this city." And the Texans actually posted that after they drafted Tank, and basically said, like, yeah, we weren't going to let you leave the city, which I thought was pretty cool. And I also like the value for Tank at pick 69, nice. But the Houston Texans, I thought they were pretty big winners, and they had to give up a future one, but look, DeMeco Ryans has his pass rusher of the future, and as we saw with his time in San Francisco, what he can do with pass rush, I have no problem giving up a future one. I just hope that it's not in the bottom 5 or the top 5 next year for the Cardinals to capitalize on. So these were my biggest winners of the 2023 draft. If your team was not featured, this does not mean they made any good picks, because of course every team made a good pick here and there. But I hope you guys enjoyed, and if you did, please like the video and subscribe to the channel, as it would mean the world and help tremendously with the almighty YouTube algorithm. My links for my Twitter and Patreon are in the description, and until next time, please be safe and have a great day. Love you guys.